Some conversations aren't meant to be overheard. I wasn't looking for answers that day. I was just walking back to my daughter's front door. What I heard changed the way I looked at my own family and made me wonder whether growing old means slowly becoming someone people plan around instead of someone they still see. I wish I could tell you I misunderstood. I still hope I did. The hardest part wasn't hearing my son ask who would get the house. It was hearing my daughter answer, "Mark, keep your voice down." Then, after a pause, "Dad doesn't need to know we're talking about this." I froze. The front door was still open. I'd walked back because I'd left my reading glasses in the truck, and I was about to head inside for Sunday dinner. Instead, I stood on Emily's front porch with one hand still on the screen door. Mark spoke again. "If something happens, the house has to be sold." Emily sighed. "Not right away. We can't just let it sit there." Another pause. Then Mark said quietly, "Dad won't need all that money." Nobody sounded angry. Nobody was yelling. That somehow made it worse. I stepped backward before the floorboards could creak, walked to my truck, sat behind the wheel, never even started the engine, just watched people driving past Emily's neighborhood, while one question kept circling in my head. When did my kids get comfortable talking about my life? Like I'd already finished living it. My name's Richard. I'm 72, retired high school history teacher. My wife Linda died 5 years ago. People ask whether retirement gets lonely. I usually tell them no. Truth is, you get used to quiet. The house gets quieter. The mornings get quieter. Even making coffee sounds louder than it used to. Never been rich. Still wasn't. The mortgage had been paid off years earlier. I had a retirement account that let me sleep at night, but wouldn't impress anybody. An old Ford pickup. A garage full of tools. Enough money to spoil the grandkids every Christmas without checking my bank balance first. That was enough. At least I'd always thought so. I had 2 kids. Mark was 47. Emily was 44. Good people. Or at least I'd spent 47 and 44 years believing they were. Mark worked long hours. Emily somehow balanced a job, 2 kids, and a house that always looked cleaner than mine. We saw each other almost every Sunday. Birthdays, barbecues, Thanksgiving. Christmas always rotated between their houses. Nothing about us felt unusual. That's probably why what I overheard hit me so hard. There hadn't been a big family fight. Nobody owed anybody money. Nobody had asked me for a loan. You'd met us the week before, you'd have called us a close family. So would I. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, like I always did. Old habit from 30 years of teaching. The house was still dark. I filled the kettle. The blue coffee mug Linda bought me sometime in the late 90s was waiting where I always left it. The handle had a hairline crack running through it. Emily had told me more than once to throw it away. Never did. Coffee tasted the same either way. I carried the mug onto the back porch. Linda's flower beds were starting to bloom. Funny thing, when she was alive, I couldn't have told you the name of a single flower out there. Now I knew which ones needed watering first. Life changes you in quiet ways. After breakfast, I pulled weeds for half an hour. Then I mowed the lawn. The old mower rattled so much the neighbor's dog started barking every time I turned it on. Just another ordinary Monday. Except nothing felt ordinary anymore. A couple weeks earlier, before any of this happened, my attorney had called. "Richard," he said, "your will's almost 10 years old." So life changes. Probably worth reviewing. That sounded reasonable. People update insurance. They replace smoke detector batteries. A will didn't seem much different. The following Sunday, I mentioned it over lunch without giving it much thought. "I've got an appointment with Howard next Thursday." Emily looked up. "Everything okay?" "Sure. Just updating the will." "Oh." She reached for the mashed potatoes. Mark nodded once. "Probably smart." Then my oldest grandson started talking about baseball tryouts. Emily asked if anyone wanted more iced tea. The conversation moved on, or at least, that's what I believed. Looking back now, I keep wondering whether that one sentence stuck around long after we stopped talking about it. Because people don't always discuss important things while you're sitting at the table. Sometimes they wait till you walk outside, or till you drive home, or till they think you're gone. For 3 days after overhearing them, I told nobody. Not Howard, not my neighbor, not Frank, who'd been meeting me for breakfast every Tuesday for nearly 30 years. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there'd been another sentence before I walked up, or after I left. Maybe Mark had been talking about assisted living. Maybe Emily had been trying to protect me. Maybe. Funny how the word maybe can keep an old man awake. By Thursday, I'd almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Then my phone rang. It was Mark. "Hey, Dad." "Morning. You busy?" "Not really." "I was just thinking," he hesitated. "You ever consider selling the house?" I looked through the kitchen window toward the backyard. "What brought that on?" "Oh, I don't know. It's a lot of work for one person." "I guess. You could get something smaller. Less maintenance." Perfectly reasonable. In fact, I'd probably given that same advice to other people. But after Sunday, those words landed different. I changed the subject, asked about work, asked about the grandkids. We hung up a few minutes later. The house suddenly felt quieter than it had an hour earlier. 2 evenings later, Emily drove me home after dinner because she'd insisted I leave my truck overnight. As I reached for the door handle, she said, "Dad?" "Yeah?" "You're still comfortable driving after dark?" I looked at her. "Of course." "You can see okay?" "I passed my eye exam 2 months ago." She smiled. "I know. I was just checking." Just checking. Mark had been just checking too. Didn't think much about those words at first. Then I started hearing them everywhere. Just checking if you need groceries. Just checking whether your furnace is still working. Just checking if you're taking your pills. None of it sounded cruel. None of it sounded greedy. If anything, it sounded caring. And somehow, that made everything even harder to understand. The following Thursday, I walked into Howard's office carrying the same manila folder I'd brought in 10 years earlier. He was standing by the coffee machine with his back to me. "Help yourself," he said without turning around. "I've already had 2 cups." I poured one anyway. His office smelled exactly the way it always had. Coffee, old books, legal pads, the air conditioner that never seemed to work quite well enough. Howard finally sat down behind his desk. "So, you ready to update your will?" I rested the folder on my lap. "I've actually got a different question." He took off his glasses. That usually meant he wasn't in a hurry. "Go ahead." I looked out the window for a second. Then I asked, "What usually causes families to fall apart?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back and folded his hands. I've been doing this for 35 years. I've watched brothers sue sisters. Sisters stop speaking to brothers. Children disappear after funerals. I waited. So? He shrugged. It usually isn't the money. I frowned. No? No. What is it then? He gave a tired little smile. Expectations. I didn't say anything. Howard kept going. People spend inheritances in their heads years before they ever get them. They don't even realize they're doing it. He looked right at me. Sometimes it's greed. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes they're just trying to prepare for something they don't know how to face. He picked up a pencil, rolled it between his fingers. But once people start imagining the future, they start treating that future like it's already here. I thanked him, picked up my folder, never even opened it. Driving home, I took the long way through town, past the ball field where I'd coached Little League for 3 summers, past the hardware store where Linda always complained I bought things I didn't need, past the cemetery. I slowed down there, didn't stop, just slowed down. When Linda died, I thought grief would be one sharp pain. Instead, it turned into hundreds of little reminders. An empty chair, half a loaf of bread that lasted twice as long, nobody asking if I wanted more coffee. You don't notice those things while they're happening. You notice them after they stop. That night, I opened the hall closet. The photo albums were stacked on the top shelf. Heavy, dusty. I carried them into the living room. The first album was camping trips. Mark couldn't have been older than 9. He was standing beside a fish almost as long as his arm. Emily had marshmallow all over her face. Linda was laughing so hard, the picture came out blurry. I smiled without meaning to. Then I reached the more recent albums. Graduations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. The strange thing wasn't what I saw. It was what I didn't. There weren't many pictures of us just being together. Almost every recent photo had a project in it. Mark replacing a ceiling fan. Emily organizing my medicine cabinet. Everybody cleaning leaves out of the gutters. Installing new smoke detectors. Fixing porch steps. Helping me move furniture. Useful things. Kind things. But somewhere along the way, our visits had quietly turned into appointments. I shut the album, sat there a long time. Maybe every family changes like that. Maybe that's just what happens when kids become parents themselves. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling we'd stopped making memories and started maintaining me. The following Tuesday, Frank noticed something before I even sat down. You look tired. I didn't sleep much. He pushed the sugar toward me. You gonna tell me why? I stirred my coffee, watched it spin. I overheard something. What kind of something? My kids. He waited. I appreciated that. Didn't interrupt, didn't guess. I finally told him. Not every word, just enough. When I finished, Frank stared out the diner window. After a while, he said, "You know what scares me?" "What?" "My boys don't ask about my health. They don't ask about my money either. They don't ask much of anything." I laughed. "So I'm lucky?" "I didn't say that." He smiled. "I'm saying every family gets complicated after a certain age." "You think I'm imagining it?" "I think." He took another sip. "Once something gets inside your head, it's hard not to see everything through it." I knew exactly what he meant. 'cause I'd already started doing it. The next Sunday, I got to Emily's a little early. The grandkids were already in the backyard. Mark was standing beside the grill. He waved. "Hey, Dad. Need a hand?" "I'm good." He flipped a burger, then looked toward the house. "You still got that ladder?" "Which one?" "The aluminum one." "Yeah." "I might borrow it next weekend." A month ago, I wouldn't have thought twice about that conversation. Now I caught myself wondering whether he was picturing my garage or my life after I was gone. I hated that thought the second it crossed my mind, because it wasn't fair, not to him, not to me. Suspicion changes ordinary conversations. It makes simple questions sound heavier than they are, and I was starting to hear weight in everything. After dinner, Emily handed me a container. "Leftover pie." "Thanks." She smiled. "Don't let it sit in the refrigerator all week." "I won't." As I walked toward the front door, she called after me. "Oh, did Howard help you get everything figured out?" I stopped, turned around. "Mostly." She nodded. "Good." That was all. Just one word. Good. On the drive home, I kept wondering. Had she asked because she cared whether I'd finally taken care of my paperwork? Or because she wanted to know whether there'd be surprises someday? Worst part was, I honestly couldn't tell anymore. A few days later, I called Howard. "Are you free this afternoon? For you?" "I can make time." When I got there, he already had my file on his desk. "You've made up your mind?" "I think so." He slid the paperwork aside. "What changed?" I looked down at my hands. I realized I don't want my kids' last important conversation about me to happen after my funeral. Howard nodded slowly. "I hear that more often than you'd think. I don't want them arguing over paperwork." "Then don't leave them paperwork. Leave them instructions." That sounded simple. Maybe it was. Maybe I'd been making it harder than it needed to be. We spent the next hour setting up a living trust. Nothing dramatic, just signatures, initials, a few questions. When we finished, Howard closed the folder. "That's the legal part." He tapped the cover with one finger. "The family part's still up to you." The following Sunday, I invited everyone to my house instead. Nothing special. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Emily showed up carrying fresh rolls. Mark walked in with 2 bags of ice balanced under one arm. The grandkids disappeared into the backyard before anyone could ask them to wash their hands. Everything felt familiar. The old clock in the dining room ticked. Someone laughed in the kitchen. For a while, I almost forgot why I'd invited everyone. Then dessert came. Emily cut the pie. Mark poured coffee. I cleared my throat. "I've been getting a few things organized." Nobody said anything. "I've decided to simplify things." Emily looked at me. "What kind of things?" "Oh," I shrugged. "The legal stuff." "I've already made my decisions." Silence settled over the table. Not an uncomfortable silence, just the kind where everybody waits for the next sentence. Mark finally spoke. "So, what happens to the house?" Before I answered, Emily asked, "And your investments?" I looked from one face to the other. Neither sounded excited, neither sounded greedy. If anything, they sounded nervous, like people trying to figure out the rules before a game started. Still, there was one question I kept waiting to hear. Nobody asked it. Nobody said, "Dad, how are you doing?" The pie sat untouched on my plate. I suddenly wasn't hungry anymore. "The house is taken care of," I said. "So are the investments." Mark nodded.
"Okay." Emily smiled politely. "That's probably for the best." A few seconds later, my youngest grandson burst through the back door. "Grandpa, can you come see this?" Everyone laughed. The conversation moved on. Only I didn't. Monday morning, I unlocked the garage. Sunlight came through the dusty windows. For years, I'd walked past the same shelves without really seeing them. Now, I stopped in front of every one. An old tackle box, my first socket set, coffee cans full of nails, a baseball glove with cracked leather, the aluminum ladder Mark had borrowed a dozen times. None of those things would mean much at an estate sale. To somebody else, they were junk. To me, they were 30 or 40 years of ordinary life. I picked up Linda's recipe box next. It had lived on the kitchen counter so long I barely noticed it anymore. Some recipe cards were stained with butter. One still had a fingerprint in dried flour. I smiled. Linda would have laughed if she'd seen me smiling at recipe cards. That afternoon, I drove to Emily's. She looked surprised when she opened the door. "Dad?" "I brought you something." She looked down at the little wooden box. For a second, she didn't move. Then she whispered, "Mom's recipes." I nodded. "I thought you should have them, while I'm still around to tell you which cookies she always burned." Emily laughed, a real laugh. Then she hugged me. Not the quick kind people give before leaving. She just stood there, holding the box with one arm, holding me with the other. "You should have done this years ago," she said quietly. "I know. So should I." That sentence stuck with me all the way home. Not because it solved anything, because it sounded honest. Maybe we were all guilty of waiting too long. The next week, my oldest grandson came over after school. He dropped his backpack by the garage door. "You still serious about teaching me to fish?" I wouldn't have offered if I wasn't. His grin reminded me of Mark at the same age. We loaded the rods into my old Ford. The passenger door still squeaked when it opened. Had squeaked for 15 years. I kept saying I'd fix it. Never did. The lake was quiet, hardly anybody there. We baited our hooks, cast our lines, spent more time talking than fishing. Halfway through the afternoon, he asked, "Grandpa?" "Yeah?" "Why'd you give me a tackle box?" I looked out across the water. "Because I got tired of waiting for the right time." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "When your grandma was alive, we always talked about doing things later. We'd save the good dishes. We'd save the nice bottle of wine. We'd save vacations." I reeled my line in. Turns out, later isn't guaranteed. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he was just being polite. Either way. We stayed till sunset. Neither of us caught a fish. Neither of us cared. Over the next month, I kept giving things away. Not everything, just the things that carried stories. The old military medals went to the local museum. The curator turned them over careful in his hands. "You sure?" I nodded. "They've spent 30 years in a drawer. They deserve better than that." He smiled. "We'll make sure people know whose they were." I don't need that. Just let somebody learn something from them. I found Linda's sewing basket in the hall closet. Emily took that too. Mark got my old toolbox, not because it was valuable, because every drawer still had my handwriting on masking tape. Sockets, wrenches, electrical. He ran his hand across the lid. "I haven't seen this since I was a kid." I figured you'd recognize it. He laughed. I still remember borrowing a screwdriver without asking. And getting caught. You never put it back. I know. For a second, it felt like we weren't 60 and 70 years old anymore. Just a father teasing his son. One afternoon, Howard called.
Everything going all right? So far? Any regrets? I thought about it. 1. What's that? I should have started giving things away years ago. He chuckled. I hear that a lot. Funny. People spend decades collecting things, then hope somebody else understands why they mattered. I've stopped expecting that. What do you expect now? I looked around my living room. The shelves were emptier than they'd been in years. Oddly enough, the house didn't feel emptier. It felt lighter. I expect memories to travel better than furniture. Howard didn't answer. Didn't need to. Summer slowly turned toward fall. Another Sunday rolled around. Then another. Nobody mentioned the will again. Nobody asked about investments. Nobody brought up the house. Maybe because they knew everything had already been decided. Or maybe because life had just moved on. Either way, our conversations slowly changed. Emily called one Wednesday. Are you busy Friday? I don't think so. The kids have the afternoon off. Want to come watch Emma's soccer game? For a second, I almost asked, why? Instead, I said, I'd like that. Mark started stopping by without bringing a ladder or a toolbox. Sometimes we'd sit in the garage drinking coffee. Sometimes we'd just watch a baseball game on television. Not every visit had to accomplish something anymore. Hadn't even realized how much I'd missed that. One Sunday, I carried my coffee out onto the porch. Same blue mug, same crack in the handle. The backyard was loud. The grandkids had invented some game with a baseball, 2 lawn chairs, and rules that seemed to change every 5 minutes. Emily was laughing. Mark was arguing with one of the boys about whether that last pitch counted. Nobody noticed I was watching. I liked that. After a while, Mark walked onto the porch. He eased himself into the chair beside mine. We sat there without talking. The game kept going in the yard. A breeze moved through Linda's flowers. Finally, he nodded toward my coffee. Still using that old mug? I guess I am. Emily keeps telling me to throw it away. You gonna? I looked down at the crack running through the handle. No. He smiled. Mom would have said the same thing. Probably. Another minute passed. Then he said quietly, I'm glad we're still doing Sundays. So am I. That was enough. No speeches, no apologies, no dramatic confessions. Just 2 men sitting on a porch while kids laughed in the yard. I still don't know exactly what Mark and Emily meant that day I overheard them. Maybe they were planning. Maybe they were worrying. Maybe they chose the wrong words. Or maybe I only heard the worst part of a longer conversation. I'll never know. And somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't need to know. I spent weeks wondering who'd inherit my money. In the end, I realized the only thing worth leaving behind was a family that still wanted to sit at the same table.